And my hot take is that stakeholders are just doing their job. They're not out there to derail your product roadmap. They're not trying to make your life a living hell. They are there to do their job. And the better we get at understanding what their job is and what they're trying to accomplish for their customers and how they get paid and incentivized at your company, the better collaboration there will be, better outcomes for all. That's my hot take.
Hello and welcome to another episode of One Night in Product Hot Takes Edition, where I speak to one person about one thing, get straight to the point and find out what's on their mind. Now, if you've got your own hot take, why not go over to onenightinproduct.com/hot, grab a time and we can have a chat together. But in any case, do remember to subscribe to the podcast on your favourite podcast app or on YouTube so you can make sure that you never miss another episode again. Anyway, enough of me. Let's get straight to Rina Alexin's hot take. All right, so in front of me, I see a fairly nondescript background with almost no features on it at all, but there's a person in front of it with a very posh microphone and smiling away, someone that I think once bought me a plate of sausages. So I'm going to throw over to you. Who are you? Where are you based? What do you do? And most importantly, what's your hot take?
Thank you, Jason. Hi, everyone. My name is Rina Alexin. I'm the CEO of Productside. I live in sunny Miami, normally sunny Miami, with my husband and my now 10-month-old son. Yeah, background's a little bit nondescript. I need to get Robin Diaz, our designer, working on a big green poster for me. That's going to be in the works now. But yeah, so thanks for having me here. I'm excited to talk to you today. You know, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I want my hot take to be on stakeholders, because stakeholder management is one of the top 3 problems we see at every single organization. Almost every conversation I have with a product leader, at some point, stakeholders comes up. And my hot take is that stakeholders are just doing their job. They're not out there to derail your product roadmap. They're not trying to make your life a living hell. They are there to do their job. And the better we get at understanding what their job is and what they're trying to accomplish for their customers and how they get paid and incentivized at your company, the better collaboration there will be, better outcomes for all. That's my hot take.
Well, you know, I'm now curious about myself, whether I should agree or disagree with that and be kind of all kind of stakeholders boo, or whether I should sort of empathize with them. But actually, it's an interesting one. I'd be interested in your take on this from a product perspective. I have sometimes referred to this when I talk to people, when I'm working with people. I know you work with a lot of companies yourself as well, you and everyone in your company, but this idea of almost doing product management on your, or product discovery on your organization, rather than, like, what it's like. You get these product managers that are out there saying, oh, I never get to talk to users, I never get to talk to customers, I never get to do this, and I want to do more discovery, blah, blah, blah. I want to empathize with my users, but they spend zero time at all empathizing with their stakeholders, with their colleagues, with their co-workers. And it just feels like there's a real disconnect there that really needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and I agree with you. One of my first pieces of advice to product managers when I hear this is, well, how can you apply your great product management skills to this problem? Because what the problem is, it could be a number of different things. It could be you have a really poor intake process. You have a very poor communication strategy. Usually that one's there with your stakeholders. But a lot of times there are some problems, I think, that are outside of that product manager's control or that product leader control. And that has to do with executive leadership. So sometimes I think that the stakeholder problem is a problem that is a symptom of a bigger problem, which is that the organization doesn't really understand the priorities. And I mean, it's pretty simple. I don't know, Jason, if you've had this experience where you go into an organization and, since you do some consulting as well, and you ask the different team members, what are the company's top priorities? And you get 15 different people, 15 different responses.
16 or 17 different responses from 15 people, right?
Right, exactly. And so I think that's where, okay, I like to think of the product manager role as one of the most important levers in an organization. Why? Because the product manager work that gets done is essentially the input to everybody else's work. That's why stakeholders are so important. And that's why this problem is so prevalent and so hard, is the decisions that a product manager makes now affect the real livelihood for other people in the organization, what they work on, what they get to sell, what they market, what they support, all of that. So it's no surprise that some people get really upset when product managers don't do the thing that will help them do their job and help them take care of their customer. And that's why I say it's a problem of leadership, because if leadership is clear, hey, these are our priorities and this is what everybody should be focused on, then in an intake process, have the stakeholder mark which priority the request is related to. That's an easy way for the stakeholders themselves to kind of think, okay, this probably won't get worked on because it's not getting us to this new market, or it's not solving this big, this big problem that we're trying to solve for our current customer. So yeah, I like to think that, the stakeholder problem, it's there, it's very common, but it's also very solvable.
But one of the things you talked about there was, of course, the importance of alignment and communication and having good, not that everyone would agree with this, but good processes. Process is a dirty word to some. I think that for me, it's like, I always say, like, processes like garlic, too much and your food's inedible, but too little and it tastes of nothing. So you need to have the perfect amount of garlic in your food. I love garlic. But there's also this thing around, well, there are some people in an organization, and I think specifically in this sort of situation of people like the sales team, whose incentives and motivations and kind of what they're being told to do by the aforementioned leadership are almost, they just feel so disconnected in many ways from what the product team are being asked to do. So the sales team, very all about the next deal and trying to get the revenue across the line for the quarter. Depending on the salesperson, could be quite likely to kind of push the envelope on those requests and deals because, that's the way that they get those deals across the line. And then you've got these product managers sitting there at the back saying, well, we don't think we should be doing that yet, or we're not doing that, but then it gets escalated. And then these persuasive salespeople manage to persuade the leadership team to just this one time, for the 19th time in a row, get it, changed or escalated, or get the roadmap rejigged again. So do you feel that you talked about leadership. Do you feel that there's an important role for leadership to kind of make sure that everyone's, that doesn't happen, that you're not in a situation where escalations are kind of just de facto the way that things get done, and that you're always going to be in a situation where people with different motivations and different incentives are always kind of crashing the roadmap and making it impossible to stick to a plan?
Yeah, okay. So I still think that this very same problem is a problem of leadership. I'm gonna go into this one first, and then we could talk communication as well. But okay, so this is a very common problem where the common story of, like, the salesperson who wants to close this one deal or has a current customer who's really, really important, re-upping, and have this customer has very specific requirements. Very common, especially for B2B enterprise companies, where the size of the deal is so big, right? That's the important part. And in that case, also sometimes the buyer, that's the other issue, the buyer and the users are very different. So who are you trying to solve, or like what are the most important requirements? Who are you trying to solve for? So I still think that that's a failure of leadership. Okay, product managers don't have any ability to influence compensation plans. And the salesperson, ironically, it's one of the only roles in most companies that does have incentivized behavior. So the way that the salesperson is behaving is completely directly related to how they're getting paid. And the product manager has no influence there. And so that is what caused a lot of the frustration, because how you get paid this quarter versus over the next 3 years, there's a lot of risk in the next 3 years of the hypothetical growth. And then as an individual salesperson, there's probably a limit, a ceiling to how much of that overall expansion you're going to get, because how much business can you individually close versus how does that sales team grow, right? So there's a lot going on here. And so the only way I think that a company can really make those kinds of trade-off decisions between the long term of what's good for the company and the short term of what's good for an individual salesperson and an individual client, it has to be made at the leadership level. And usually it's made at companies that have some kind of, I want to say, a review process, a roundtable, some kind of governance process where the trade-offs are actually articulated and understood. Because the problem is that, and I think you know, is you can say yes to everything, but that doesn't mean everything will get done, right? There's a limited amount of resources at a company. And so executives, when they're being told by this one salesperson this one time, and they're just saying yes to it, they're not paying the cost of that decision. And so that cost of the decision is now being paid by the business, by other aspects that are not going to be worked on. And that's not a good decision-making process to be made at that point, because you're not even wholly understanding the ramifications of the decision for the company. And so those need to be made in a setting where the trade-offs are then argued and everybody's on the same page of what doesn't get done, right? What's now out of bounds, what's not going to be our top priority, because we're all agreeing that for the company, for the business, this is now taking first priority.
So you're the CEO and you're the ultimate escalation point in your company. So you're going to go on the record now and say that at Productside, that never happens. None of these escalate. No one's ever selling off the books.
It even, it happens here, and we have to say no. I've had to say no to things, and they hurt, right? It really hurts to say no to some of these things, because it's like, oh, this revenue is like right there, but it's okay. I'm going to say it as well. A lot of times these requests, not only is the ramifications for the business unknown, but the actual cost of doing the thing is not well defined. So what I mean is, it's like the salesperson, it's like, oh, it should be easy to do, right? Like, let's just do it. It'll take us a week. Right? It usually derails, you have to ship focused. So you're losing momentum on what you said you wanted to do. And I think that contributes a lot to the problem of things not getting shipped. Like, a lot of companies have problems not actually shipping things. And I think that's because they're losing focus all the time. They're not agreeing, what are we going to do? And there's all of this. I think it's unhealthy to think that people can truly plan with this 20% free time that I've heard over the years around, like, everyone's Fridays to work on creative work or something. Maybe they could do it because they have so many people, but most companies are lean, especially now. They're very lean. They don't have this 20% to dedicate. So usually the reason why I think a lot of companies are struggling is they're underestimating the effort required to actually not just build something, but also then roll it out and support it, the maintenance of it. And then what do you find out as you are doing it? There's all these other things that then suddenly you're not even aware, it's not part of the original scope, and you have to add to it. So yeah, it's just, I think that's why stakeholder management is so hard, because this happens to a lot of product teams. They're trying to accomplish what they believe is going to be the most valuable thing for their market, for the business. And they're frequently derailed by well-meaning people in their organization who also want to do the best thing for their business.
All right, so just a very quick message from my sponsor. Now, as a consultant, inbound leads are like gold dust to me, and I need to know where they're coming from so I can follow up. That's why I'm back talking about Lead Feeder, a tool that helps you cut through your data and turn your website visitors into solid leads. Lead Feeder shows you which companies are checking out your site, tracks their behavior, and integrates it all with your CRM, which turns Lead Feeder into your secret weapon for targeted lead engagement and makes it easier for your team to convert website traffic into sales. You can head over to leadfeeder.com/try for a free demo and get a free extended premium trial when you let them know you found out about Lead Feeder through the One Night in Product podcast. You can check the show notes for more details, but right now let's get back to Rina. We've kind of named, I guess, what we might call a problem, or certainly at least something to consider within an organization. And you talked a little bit about communication just before we went off on that, kind of not a tangent, but like the kind of the side quest with about CEOs being the ones that should be sort of setting the direction and being okay to say no. But like when it comes back to, like, I mean, just saying no, right? It's that kind of cliche that product managers apparently get to say all the time. Product managers just have to say no, and then they'll start talking about outcomes over outputs, and they'll start using lots of buzzwords and whatever the latest framework that they've seen on LinkedIn or whatever. There's kind of this almost internal language that product teams use that probably isn't shared with most of the rest of the business. So how do you recommend that product teams go out there and actually, when they're trying to maybe, let's call it, win an argument or advocate for something different to the way that things are currently being done, because of those motivations, like how do you recommend that these people actually kind of bridge the gap and start to talk a common language to these people?
Yeah. So, Jason, first, I don't necessarily think the I know we even say you should say no. We even have an exercise in one of our classes called the wheel of no. I feel yeah, you in a way, yes, but really the ultimate decision doesn't often lie with the product manager, it lies with the leadership. It's more about you have to influence the right people to understand why you're saying no. And usually that means I want to say there's two things. One is you have to be being able to run experiments. So I just said you don't really usually have capacity, but I think the great product teams, what they do is they limit we call it tiny acts of discovery, right? They try to do small validation experiments. They have hypotheses where they're trying to measure something, they're trying to learn something, and they're doing that continuously. And they are putting cycles behind this. This is not part of that 20%. They actually are planning for this. And the reason why you do want to have some of that is because you will get these requests from leadership. And what you need to do is not build the whole thing. It's just help them understand the cost and also validate their hypothesis. Like, how real is what they are saying in the market? Can you actually find evidence to say, to go either direction? Yes, we should do this, or no, we tested it and we shouldn't. So in terms of then communication, it's another common problem when we go and we talk to organizations, not just to product teams, but other people that work with them. One of the most frequent things that we hear is that we don't know what the product team is actually doing, right? The communication of here are our priorities, or here's our roadmap. Like, some people haven't seen a roadmap in months, if not years. And it's hard to admit sometimes, but it's true. And they don't know, they don't have rhythms in their organization with regards to meetings, newsletters, just like any kind of very systematized way of communicating to the broader audience of the organization. And great product leaders, sometimes when they step into a new role, that's one of the first things they do is they establish they establish transparency through either a newsletter, a meeting, a roundtable process, right? Governance, where they're inviting leaders, but they're also inviting teams that work with product management to make the product work visible, because there's so much of it that is being done and constantly is changing, that the need for communication, it's always there. And so you really need to establish rhythms in your organization to do it. Now, there are different kinds of stakeholders at your organization. And so you need to go, if you haven't done this yet, I mean, this is why it's one of the very first exercises in our optimal product management course is communication strategy for your stakeholders. Not all of your stakeholders need to be informed about every single thing that the product team is doing. Some of them need, monthly, like I said, maybe a newsletter is enough to let them know what the product team is working on. Others who do need to have daily or weekly updates, they need a different communication strategy. So you need to spend the time on mapping out your stakeholders, and you need to understand what do they need, what kind of information do they need, and deliver to them in a repeatable format. Ideally, things like one-pagers, right? We are a big fan of one-pagers because they're repeatable formats. Everybody knows what to expect. They know what questions to ask. And you're essentially training your stakeholders on here's the information and here's where you can find it. And so you can stop coming to me with questions ad hoc and instead, like, here, I'm giving it to you in the format that is easy for you to read.
So I agree with all of that. I do think it's also one of the most important things to kind of just get that visibility and transparency. And we've talked a lot about like what we need to do to kind of move towards the rest of the business, the commercial parts of the business, make sure that we're kind of talking their language a little bit, making sure that we're making our stuff visible to them. And you talked a little bit about, for example, having some kind of deal review process for sales teams to kind of make their stuff visible as well. But some maybe more starry-eyed product managers out there might sit there and say, well, what about us? Like, why aren't people moving towards us? So why aren't they moving towards us? Like, why aren't people coming more towards how we're trying to work as well as us trying to come towards them?
That's a really good question. I actually think that people are trying to move towards them. I think that companies sometimes are not very good at defining how the different teams collaborate. And why does the product manager have to lead in this? It's because the product manager ends up with a lot of the problems. And so they're going to have the highest incentive and motivation to make sure that the collaboration does stick. But it is true, Jason, that a lot of companies do not do collaboration very well. And that's actually why when we go into organizations, we not only train product managers, but we have a whole course called Product Management Collaboration for Stakeholders. I think we're the only company that does this, because when a company is trying to change how product teams operate and try to bring them to higher maturity, they have to bring their stakeholders along with them. And sometimes those conversations, they don't happen unless you force them. And then you're going to end up with these ad hoc intake forms where I've heard product managers say, like, I get requests flying at me from every single direction, and I don't even know what to do and where to start. And I like to say, like, at least we start at the beginning, apply product management to this. What is the problem? How might we solve this? And unfortunately, because the product manager is the one experiencing this, it's not like a salesperson isn't going to suddenly wake up and say, my life is going to be better if I solve this problem, because they're not feeling the problem. The support staff, they're not going to add that to their plate. Their finance isn't going to add that. So it's really leadership and it's really product, because they're the ones that are making they're the ones making all the decisions that are going to be the input to everybody else's work. So the friction point is between product and all of these other stakeholders. And that's the way the other people see it. And product has the opportunity to truly be leaders in the organization and help establish better collaboration practices. So I think that's why. I think they're trying to come in, but they're not going to wake up and know what they're doing is wrong. Like, I don't think that's natural. I don't think we should expect that from them.
No, that's fair enough. And again, strongly resonates with some of the stuff that I see out there as well. So, hopefully between us, we can keep fighting the good fight. You've talked a lot about courses, and of course, there are other training providers available as well. This is not a sponsored episode, but if people do want to come and find you after this and find out more about what you do or chat to you about stakeholders, where can they come and do that?
Sure. Thanks, Jason. And yes, there are product managers. There are so many ways to upskill and get better product leaders. There are definitely other players out there. I just talk from my experience and our experience at Productside. Please visit our website. And you can also follow me on LinkedIn, Rina Alexin. And Jason, I love reading your posts on LinkedIn, so please do it. You bring much needed humor to this industry, and I do so much enjoy this conversation as well. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, well, no, thanks very much for popping along. It's been a while getting this one set up, and I'm glad that we could have a deep and meaningful chat. And thanks for your hot take.
Thanks, Jason.